Hello, Taurus. Welcome in. Before we get into your reading, just take a slow breath with me. Let your shoulders soften a little. Let whatever happened before you arrived here settle for a moment, and just allow yourself to be present with this message. Take what resonates and leave the rest. Taurus, the first card sitting here is the Seven of Pentacles, and I have to tell you, I immediately feel this deep sense of waiting. Not passive waiting, though. This feels like the kind of waiting that comes after you have already done the work. You planted something. You invested your time, your heart, your money, your energy, perhaps even years of your life into something, and there may have been moments when you quietly wondered, was all of this worth it? Because I don't feel like you've been sitting around, hoping that life would magically change. No, you've been showing up, you've been trying, you've been holding something together, even when nobody really understood how much effort it was taking from you. And with strength coming through beside the Seven of Pentacles, yeah. I feel like you've been stronger than you've allowed yourself to acknowledge. There may have been situations where you wanted to walk away, speak up, or simply say, I can't carry this anymore. But something inside you kept going. For some of you, this could absolutely connect to work or money. Perhaps you've been building something slowly, trying to create more security, waiting for an opportunity, or wondering when your efforts are finally going to reflect in what you're receiving. For others, this feels deeply emotional. You may have invested yourself in a relationship, a family situation, or something you genuinely believed could become stable and lasting. But look at what comes out here. The Star. Oh, Taurus, I love seeing this here because the energy suddenly feels lighter. It feels like you've been walking through a long season where you couldn't quite see the horizon, and something is beginning to clear. Maybe nothing dramatic has happened yet. Maybe externally everything still looks almost the same, but internally, I feel like hope is returning. And that's important, because right beside this we have the Ace of Cups. There's something about your heart opening again. Maybe you're beginning to want something again after convincing yourself you didn't care anymore. Maybe you're allowing yourself to imagine a different relationship, a different career, a different home, or simply a different version of your everyday life. It feels fresh, quiet, but fresh. And I keep getting this feeling that you're not going to approach this new chapter as the same Taurus who entered the old one. Because here comes the King of Swords. You're clearer now. There are things you tolerated before that you may not tolerate anymore. There are places where you once overextended yourself because you wanted to keep the peace, maintain stability, or prove that you could handle everything. But something has changed in the way you're looking at your own time and energy. You may be asking yourself, does this actually deserve me? Not, can I make this work? That's a very different question, and perhaps that's why the Seven of Pentacles feels so significant. You've spent enough time watching what you've planted. You've learned what grows when you nurture it, but you've also learned what continues taking from you without giving anything meaningful back. Okay, Taurus, I feel like that's where this reading starts becoming really interesting. Because the Star and the Ace of Cups together don't feel like you're simply being asked to keep waiting forever. There is movement underneath this reading. Something you've been preparing for may be closer than it appears, and I feel like you're beginning to recognize that your patience wasn't empty time. It changed you. It sharpened your judgment. It showed you what you truly value. You've planted enough seeds, and perhaps you're finally approaching the season where you get to see which ones were meant to grow. But there's another energy beginning to push through these cards, and it doesn't feel nearly as slow as what you've been experiencing. Something may be getting ready to disrupt the pattern you've grown accustomed to, and strangely enough, Taurus, that disruption may be exactly what finally gets things moving. There's a reason the Tower is sitting so strongly in this spread, Taurus, and I don't want you to immediately associate it with something terrible. I actually feel something very different around this card. It feels like a moment of truth. Something becomes impossible to ignore, and once you see it clearly, you may not be able to go back to seeing it the way you did before. For some of you, this could happen quickly. Maybe a conversation changes your perspective. Maybe something becomes clear around work, money, a relationship, or a responsibility you've been carrying. Perhaps you simply wake up one day and realize, I don't want to live like this anymore. And that realization can be powerful. Because the Eight of Cups is here, and what strikes me about this card is that I don't necessarily feel you walking away because everything is terrible. That would almost make the decision easier. I feel like some of you may be looking at something that has been okay, something familiar, something you've learned how to live with. But okay is starting to feel very different from fulfilled. That distinction matters. Maybe it's a job that gives you stability, but doesn't value what you bring. Maybe it's a relationship where you've become accustomed to being the person who gives a little more, forgives a little more, waits a little longer. For some of you, this could even be a responsibility that was never really yours to carry indefinitely, but somehow everybody became comfortable with you carrying it. Taurus, I feel like you're becoming uncomfortable with being comfortable in the wrong place. And the Tower can shake that loose. Something about the old structure may no longer fit the person you're becoming. You may have spent a long time trying to repair it, manage it, accommodate it, or convince yourself that stability was enough reason to stay. But here comes the King of Swords again. There's a clarity around you that feels difficult to negotiate with. You may begin looking at facts rather than excuses. You may stop asking whether other people understand your decision and start asking whether the decision is right for you. That doesn't mean you become cold. It feels more like you stop abandoning your own needs simply because somebody else may be uncomfortable when you finally honor them. Yeah, that's a very different Taurus. And look at the Chariot. This is where the pace of the reading changes. Once that internal decision happens, I feel like movement could follow much more quickly than you expected. The thing that seemed stuck for months may suddenly have somewhere to go. You could find yourself considering an opportunity you previously wouldn't have entertained, making a practical change, having an overdue conversation, or simply choosing a direction and refusing to keep circling the same issue. For some of you, the Tower may even arrive as an opening rather than an ending. Something changes around you, and initially you may wonder why it had to happen that way. But that change could reveal an option you weren't seeing because you were so focused on preserving what was already there. And the star is still present. That matters to me. Because even while something is shifting, there's this quieter energy underneath it saying, keep looking forward. You may not immediately understand every piece of what's happening. You may have a moment where you miss what was familiar simply because it was familiar. That's human. Taurus energy tends to appreciate something solid beneath its feet, so a sudden change can feel strange, even when part of you knows it's necessary. But I keep sensing that this isn't about chaos for the sake of chaos. It feels more like clearing. Like life removing a piece that has become too heavy, too limiting, or too unequal for where you're trying to go. Oh my God, and there's something else beginning to show itself here. Once that weight starts coming off, the question changes completely. It's no longer only about what you're leaving behind. It becomes about what you're finally able to receive when you're no longer using so much of yourself just to hold everything together. And Taurus, what begins coming toward you has a very different feeling. It feels balanced. It feels mutual. And for someone who may have been carrying more than their share for a long time, that could change everything. There's something about the Six of Pentacles showing up here that feels almost like a correction, Taurus. Not a dramatic reward falling out of the sky, but a quiet rebalancing where you begin to notice that what you give and what you receive are finally starting to resemble each other. And I feel like that could be incredibly important for you, because the Ten of Wands is sitting close by, and there's this sense that you may have gotten so used to carrying more than your share that you stopped questioning it. You became the reliable one, the person who figures it out. The person who stays a little later, gives a little more, waits a little longer, or somehow finds the strength to keep everything moving. For some of you, this is very connected to work. Maybe you've been in a position where your responsibilities continued growing, while the recognition, money, or support didn't necessarily grow with them. You may have told yourself to be patient because you wanted stability. You may have believed that if you just kept proving yourself, eventually somebody would notice. But the Six of Pentacles feels different. I keep sensing an environment where you don't have to fight quite so hard to demonstrate your value. Perhaps there's an opportunity where the exchange feels more reasonable. Maybe someone finally acknowledges what you bring to the table. Maybe you begin having conversations about compensation, responsibilities, or what you are and are not willing to continue doing. Okay. And with the Seven of Pentacles appearing again, there's something deeply satisfying about this, because it feels connected to what you've already invested. This isn't necessarily starting from zero. Some of you may begin seeing returns from something you've quietly been building. It could be financial, professional, or even personal. You may look at something that once seemed painfully slow and realize that progress was happening beneath the surface. And Taurus, I also have to talk about relationships here, because the Ace of Cups is coming through again. There's a softer kind of reciprocity around this. If you've been the one constantly checking in, holding space, initiating conversations, keeping a connection alive, or trying to make another person feel secure while wondering where your own reassurance was, you may begin wanting something very different. Not more intensity, more mutuality. There's a difference. You may find yourself drawn toward people who actually show you that they care, rather than leaving you to interpret mixed signals. Perhaps somebody becomes more emotionally available. Perhaps an existing connection begins finding a healthier rhythm. Or for some of you, you simply become unwilling to pour from your cup into situations that continually leave you empty. Yeah, that Ace of Cups feels beautiful here because your heart isn't closing. It's becoming more selective about where it opens. And then I look at the Four of Wands, and this reading starts feeling very grounded. There's this image of having somewhere to land, home, stability, commitment, celebration. Whatever form that takes for you, it doesn't feel temporary. I don't get this restless energy of chasing something shiny, only to become disappointed once you reach it. I feel like Taurus wants to build something that can actually hold weight. Maybe that's a home that feels more peaceful. Maybe it's work where you feel respected. Maybe it's a relationship where you don't have to wonder every morning whether the other person is still emotionally present. Perhaps it's simply the feeling of waking up and realizing your life is no longer organized around managing everybody else's needs. Oh my God, that feels significant. Because when the Ten of Wands begins to lose its grip, you suddenly have energy available for yourself again. And perhaps that's the real abundance showing up here. Money may improve for some of you. Work may become more balanced. Love may become more reciprocal. But underneath all of those possibilities, there's something even more valuable happening. You're learning what it feels like to receive without immediately wondering what you owe in return. The Six of Pentacles feels like life meeting you halfway. And with the Four of Wands sitting here, I keep sensing that this balance could create room for something much more lasting than you initially realize. Because once Taurus feels safe enough to stop carrying everything, the heart begins speaking differently, and there's one final emotional layer in these cards that feels incredibly gentle. Almost like you're about to discover that what you truly wanted was never just success or stability. It was the feeling of finally being able to exhale inside the life you've built. What I love about the Queen of Cups appearing here, Taurus, is how different the emotional atmosphere feels. There's less tension around your heart, less of that feeling that you have to constantly watch, manage, anticipate, or protect yourself from disappointment. I feel like you may be entering a space where emotional peace becomes just as important as everything you've worked so hard to build. And maybe that's something you didn't always prioritize. You may have spent years thinking about security, responsibility, keeping things together, making sure everyone was okay. But the Queen of Cups turns your attention inward in such a gentle way. She almost feels like she's asking, "Taurus, but how do you feel when nobody else's needs are in the room?" That question could reveal quite a lot, because I keep sensing that you're becoming less willing to sacrifice your inner peace just to maintain something on the outside. Maybe you've done that in relationships. Maybe you've stayed quiet because you didn't want conflict. Perhaps you've accepted emotional distance because everything else seemed stable enough. But stability without emotional safety may not satisfy you anymore. And with the Ace of Cups sitting here, your heart doesn't feel finished at all. It feels ready. For some of you, somebody may begin opening up in a way you weren't expecting. There could be a conversation that feels unusually honest, where someone shares something personal or finally allows you to understand what has been happening beneath the surface. I don't want to say that has to be romantic, because it could involve somebody close to you, but there is definitely a feeling of emotional transparency. You may also notice that people feel comfortable telling you things. And Taurus, just remember that being trusted with somebody's emotions doesn't mean you have to carry them. That distinction feels important. The Nine of Cups is here too. And, oh my God, there's something quietly beautiful about this combination. It feels like you're getting closer to understanding what fulfillment actually means for you personally, rather than what you were taught it was supposed to look like. Maybe the thing you thought you wanted has changed. Maybe what once looked like success doesn't feel nearly as important as waking up peaceful. Maybe the relationship you once would have chased no longer interests you unless there's genuine emotional availability. Maybe having more money matters, but having enough freedom to enjoy your life matters too. The star adds this very soft sense of renewal around all of it. I feel like there may be something you quietly hoped for that you stopped talking about because you didn't want to disappoint yourself. You didn't necessarily stop wanting it. You just stopped staring at the door waiting for it to arrive. And perhaps that's exactly why the energy around it feels different now. You're not gripping it. You're making room for it. The Four of Wands brings this beautiful, grounded feeling into the reading as well. Whatever this new chapter becomes, I keep sensing that you want it to feel safe enough to stay. You don't need constant excitement. You don't need chaos disguised as passion. You don't need something that looks wonderful from the outside, but leaves you exhausted behind closed doors. You want something real. Something you can build around. Something that allows your nervous system to settle. Yeah, and maybe that's the greatest shift in this entire reading. You're no longer measuring abundance only by what you can accumulate. You're beginning to measure it by how peaceful your life feels while you're living it. The Queen of Cups beside the Four of Wands feels almost like coming home emotionally. The Ace of Cups gives your heart permission to begin again, while the Nine of Cups and the Star suggest that something you once wished for may still have space to find you, perhaps in a form that fits who you are now much better than what you imagined before. So Taurus, if something changes unexpectedly, you don't have to immediately assume that your stability is being taken away. Perhaps you're simply being shown that there is another kind of stability available to you, one where you're valued without constantly proving yourself. One where love doesn't require you to abandon your peace. One where receiving feels just as natural as giving. And maybe, after everything you've carried, the beautiful part isn't that life suddenly becomes perfect. Maybe it's that you finally stop holding on to what drains you long enough to recognize what feels like home.